So, we're going to start a new text. So it's important when we start a new text that we have a good motivation for doing it. Yeah. So we just chanted the prayer for refuge and bodhicitta, but really to try and internalize that and, want to study this text and learn the whole path so that we can actualize it and embody it in ourselves. So not just to get some information, not just, to see, well, what does this guy have to say for himself? But, to really learn the teachings so we can practice them and embody them. So it's called the Gomchen Lamrim. Okay, it was written by Gomchen Ngawang Drakpa. So Gomchen means great meditator. It's kind of like a title that's usually given to somebody because of how they live their life. So Gomchen Ngawang Drakpa was a native of Sang province. Sang is central Tibet, the province where Lhasa is. Yeah, Utsang is that central area. And so he was the disciple of another master called Je Lodro Tempa, who was the sixth Ganden Tripa. So the Ganden Tripa started with Je Tsongkhapa, means Ganden Tripa is the throne of Ganden, and Ganden was the monastery started by Je Tsongkhapa. And so, they have successors to the throne. So Gomchen Ngawang Drakpa's teacher, Je Lodro Tempa, was one of the successors. And he was also the abbot of Dakpo Monastery. So Dakpo Rinpoche, who lives in France, so that's his monastery in Tibet. And Ngawang Drakpa also founded several other monasteries in Loka, which I've been to. It's in South Tibet, and also the Dakpo region in South Tibet. And this Lamrim text that we're studying is like an abstract or a condensation of Je Tsongkhapa's middle-length Lamrim. Okay, and it's been described as the key to unlock that text. Okay, so the middle-length Lamrim it's not as long as the Lamrim Chenmo, the great exposition, but it's long, it's long and it's detailed. And so I thought this text, the easy path, which we just went through, was a much more meditative text. And so this one is meant for meditation as well. But I was thinking it's a bit more detailed than the easy path. And that, if we go through this and learn this, then afterwards maybe we can do the middle-length Lamrim, if we can find a good translation of it. Okay? Because I think it's good you kind of build up to it, because the middle-length Lamrim and the great Lamrim are both much longer and much more detailed, and so it's good to have the whole general overview and be already meditating on these texts before you get into so much detail. So that's what I'm thinking. Okay? So he starts out, homage to the perfect gurus. Yeah, so, paying homage, being respectful. You always start out major activities like that with taking refuge and depending on the three jewels. Now it says in our refuge guidelines to always take refuge whenever you're doing any kind of project or any kind of work. So this is the, showing how he's doing it. So through his superior practice of the three instructions and of the transmitted and realized teaching, he is able to uphold the conqueror's thinking exactly, abiding by this great master. So the great master here, he's referring to his own teacher, the Lodro Tempa, who lived 1404 to 1478. Okay, so this text was written 15th century. Okay? And then he says, I shall practice the stages of the path of Sutra and Tantra. So this text mostly deals with the Sutra path. There's one paragraph about Tantra at the end, but he's including it, so he's, making a determination to explain it as well as to practice it. And he mentions, his teacher's superior practice of the transmitted and realized teaching. So the transmitted teaching, sometimes this is translated as the scriptural and realizational Dharma. Yeah, but the scriptural teaching or the transmitted teaching, that's the one, that's the scriptures, the words, the discourses that's passed down. It's transmitted from one teacher, from a teacher to disciple. And then the realized Dharma is the realizations that we gain from practicing the transmitted Dharma. So we want to, preserve the Dharma for future generations. So we do it not only through study and learning the transmitted Dharma and hearing it and passing it down, but also by practicing it and realizing it. So we have the transmitted and the scriptural teachings, okay? I think that's good to kind of understand. Otherwise, sometimes we think, it's only the words, that has to be passed down. Or we think, words, too many words, I just want to meditate, and think that that's the only thing that needs to be passed down. But actually, we need both, don't we? Because in order to meditate, we need to listen to the teachings. So we need the transmission of the teachings. Okay. So it says this explanation of the stages of the path. So stages of the path is Lamrim. Okay? Lam means path and Rim means stages or gradual or, that idea. Something that you go through stage by stage. Okay, so this explanation of the stages of the path to awakening has 4 sections. The greatness of the author, the greatness of the teaching, how to listen and explain the teaching. So those are done quickly at the beginning. And then the fourth one, how the disciples are progressively guided by the actual teaching. So that's where the main content is. Okay? So the first 3, of these main outlines are, you go through relatively quickly. They're to give you background and also inspiration. Yeah, it's they're interesting. So the greatness of the author, is he says, for the first, refer to other works. Okay, so he's not going to. It's interesting because in the Lamrim text, when J. Rinpoche, he's writing the Lamrim, but on this first outline, the greatness of the author, he tells the story of Lama Atisha. Yeah, because he kind of, Jeffrey mentioned this the other time, that he sees Lama Atisha as like the author, even though Lama Atisha didn't write it. But he's saying, I got the inspiration from this, from Atisha. Okay, so, I have to use this. So Atisha, I can't do this anymore. So Atisha lived late 10th, early 11th century. He was a sage from the Vikramasila monastery in India, which Vikramasila was on the level of Nalanda, Odantapuri, these large monastic universities. And so he was invited to Tibet. Tara told him to go. Said his life might be a little bit shorter if he went, but he should definitely go to help those heathens in Tibet. And he went. He was quite an incredible master. But they don't, he was born as a prince in Bengal, and he went through the whole thing with his family too, having to leave the kingdom because his father wanted him to take over the empire. he ran away to the forest, and then he really wanted to receive the teachings on bodhicitta, and he couldn't find a master in India, to receive them from in the way that he wanted to hear them. And so that's when he went to Indonesia. Yeah, he was on a boat for, I think, 12, 13 months, and there were the sea monsters and the big waves, and quite a journey. And, but these stories, sometimes they sound a little bit like too much, but when you think, it doesn't matter whether it's too much or not. If it's a rough sea, it's not very pleasant. And look what people did to get the Dharma teachings back then. Yeah, you have to go through that, or Xuanzang from China, crossing over the Karakoram mountains to come into India, or I Ching also from China, going via the boats. And, it's dangerous, and there were so many people who also went those routes, and they died, either from illness or bandits or who knows what. But I find it quite inspiring to think of all those people, and they wanted the Dharma so badly that they endured all these life-threatening things. And like I said, some of them got killed, to get to India where they could learn the Dharma. Or in Atisha's case, to go to Indonesia. It was a Sirlingpa, the Golden Isle, where he went to learn. Yeah, so it wasn't easy, you travel, different country, different food, different climate, people speak a different language. Yeah, so he went there, he learned from Lama Atisha, from Sirlingpa for many, many years. They think that so there was a big monastic university also in Indonesia where Sirlingpa was. They think it was on Sumatra, the northern island of Sumatra, in a place called Jambi. So I met somebody when I was in India last year who had been there, and she's very keen on taking people on tours. I'd actually like to go on a tour of the Buddhist places in Indonesia. Yeah. So Atisha went there, he learned the teachings, he came back to India, and then after that, some Tibetans invited him to come. The Tibetans, similarly, they went through quite a lot of danger. There was, the long story involves kings and warfare and, trying to get your father out of prison by paying with gold and not having enough gold. And anyway, they finally, got him, anyway, they finally got to India and invited Lama Atisha, and Tara told him to go, and so he went. And he was quite an erudite scholar and a practitioner. But apparently, Lama Atisha taught mostly refuge and karma, which are, more introductory topics. But it seems that he did that because that's what the people of Tibet really needed. There had been the first transmission of Buddhism to Tibet, beginning in the 7th century, and then there had been a lot of degeneration, and there had been a king who had come and closed the monasteries and shattered the Sangha, and it was really quite degenerate. A lot of things were lost, and so they wanted Lama Atisha to come and reestablish Buddhism there. And so that's why he went. It's what I find quite interesting is, and I can't imagine this, because they had in Tibet, they followed the Mula Sravastivada Vinaya lineage, and Tisha was from the Mahasangika Vinaya lineage. And they asked him not to give ordination so that they could only they didn't want to have more than one Vinaya lineage in Tibet. They wanted everybody to be Mula Sravastivada. And I have that same reaction. How can you ask somebody with the qualities of Atisha not to give ordination? I don't understand that, but somehow they did. And they see that as praiseworthy now, because it's only the one lineage. And he was also a great tantric master, but it seems like they also asked him not to teach Tantra, or at least not to teach it widely. So quite interesting, you know? Yeah. Anyway, it was really due to Lama Atisha's kindness in going to Tibet and teaching, for so many years, that Buddhism got reestablished. And so you have the first transmission, that came before Langdharma, who was the horrible king that destroyed everything. That turned into the Nyingma tradition. And then the three new translation schools came from Lama Atisha, the Kagyu, the Gelu, and the Sakya. Okay, but if you look, actually, in all four of the Tibetan traditions, they all have these kind of Lamrim texts like this, so that everybody was really influenced by Lama Atisha in one way or another. Okay, so you have in the Kagyu, you have Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation. You have in Nyingma, Longchenpa's text, Is it kindly bent to ease us? I'm not sure what the name of the text is, but that's kind of like the basic Lamrim. Huh? Gomchen Ngawang. I'm not sure if that is the Lamrim or another teaching. Do you know? That's the Nundra practice. Okay. Yeah, but the Lamrim text is kindly bent to ease us. Okay. And then Patra Rinpoche, also from the Nyingma, he wrote this fantastic book called Words of My Precious Teacher. One of my teachers, Gomchen Ngawang Drakpa, used to quote that book a lot. And Patra Rinpoche was great. I love these teachers who just say it, really straight as it is. And don't let your ego wiggle out of it, And then in the Sakya, you had the beginning part, I think, of the three visions, that. Okay, so all the Tibetan traditions, when it comes to the foundation teachings, and by foundation we shouldn't think, it's the simple teachings, yeah. The foundation teachings, you do that for a little while, then you go on to Tantra. Yeah. The foundation teachings are very, very profound. And they take quite a long time to soak into you and to really understand them. So we shouldn't kind of gloss over them and think, foundation stuff is easy. It's not. It's not. Okay. What Guy was teaching last weekend. Yeah, that's included in the three principal aspects of the path, which is called foundation material. Was that easy? No. Okay. Point made. Okay. Okay, so then the second point, the greatness of the teaching. So they always talk about this at the beginning, and it's important. So we know something about the author. We know something about the teaching. Okay, so the greatness of the teaching, there's four subdivisions that's telling us what the greatness of the teaching is. Okay, so here it's referring to the Lamrim teaching. So the first one is the greatness of its allowing you to realize that all the teachings are free of contradictions. Okay, so what that means, it says, understanding that within the three vehicles, so the here solitary realizer bodhisattva vehicle, on what is to be discarded and realized in either the main path or one of its branches, constitutes, actually for the three vehicles, it could refer to the fundamental vehicle, the universal vehicle, and the tantric vehicle, he's not clear here. That anyway, that whether it's either the main path or one of the branches constitutes the method for any individual to achieve Buddhahood. Okay, so what that is. So I think it's probably the fundamental vehicle, universal vehicle, and tantric vehicle. So that's the meaning of realizing that all the teachings are free of contradictions. Okay, so what this means, because the English, the translation here needs a lot of work. Okay, I'm not happy with the translation. Anyway, it's what we have. But what this means is that it makes it easy to understand how there's nothing incompatible or contradictory in all of the Buddhist teachings. Okay? And that's important to understand, because if you don't understand it, then you hear things talked about in different contexts and you think the Buddha's contradicting himself. So for example, when we talk about precious human life, we talk about the preciousness of our human body and how wonderful it is to have this human body because it's the basis of our Dharma practice, and what rare fortune it is and this great opportunity. And then, but when you're talking for the middle capacity beings, then you talk about this body as just a lump of vegetative material that is rather foul and puts out foul stuff, and there's nothing at all to be attached to in it. So you could get really confused. Wait, precious human readers, they said, I'm so lucky to have this body and it's wonderful. And then, later on it tells me it's this garbage heap that's full of foul stuff. So, is the Buddha contradicting himself? Well, no. It's just, in the context of looking at our opportunity to practice the Dharma, then we are amazingly fortunate to have a human body and human intelligence, because it gives us the opportunity to think and learn and use language and everything like that. So in that context, the human body is very precious. In the context of studying, the 12 links and how we take rebirth into samsara, in that context, the body is seen as like the encapsulation of, it's the result of afflictions and karma, and it's something we cling on to, and that clinging keeps us bound in cyclic existence. And so, from that point of view, this body is nothing great and not to be attached to. Okay, so can you see from different viewpoints how the body is looked at differently? So if we don't understand that, then we can get really confused and, like that. Or even in terms of the precepts, when you keep the Vinaya precepts, there's the fully ordained monks and nuns vows, there's a lot of very detailed vows that govern, very small actions that you do throughout the day. And then there is a bodhisattva vow that says you're supposed to do what's beneficial for sentient beings, even if it entails going against some of these more detailed, specific Vinaya precepts. Yeah. So again, you could think, wait a minute, Buddha told me to take the Vinaya precepts, the Pratimoksha precepts. I did that. Now he's telling me that, some of the small ones, I should consider bodhicitta more important. So what's the story here? It could seem like Buddha's contradicting himself, or that it's not for a practice for one person to do. But again, the Buddha's not contradicting himself, because when we take the Pratimoksha precepts, it's done in order to regulate our physical and verbal actions, and it's done, for people at the really basic level after you take refuge. So the first thing to kind of get a handle on. When you progress, you take the Bodhisattva precepts. That's later on, once you've learned about bodhicitta, you have this feeling for wanting to become a Buddha, you already have a good foundation in the Vinaya and the Pratimoksha precepts. And then in that context, somebody who's practicing the Bodhisattva precepts, it's more beneficial for that person to do something that is going to benefit others in the long term, rather than pay minute detail to some of the small pratimoksha precepts. Yeah, if it would be more beneficial to sentient beings if you did some other activity. Okay, you getting what I'm saying? So for the beginning practitioner, yes, all the small things, really training in them, getting everything down well as best as you can. Then later, when you're more experienced and your motivation has progressed and you're really working for the benefit of sentient beings, then, if there's something more important to do that would benefit sentient beings, rather than, let's say, blessing your robe, or not blessing you, but declaring your robes, or declaring medicine, or declaring that you're drinking orange juice or something like this, then it's permissible to do what's of more benefit to sentient beings. So it's not contradictory. It's for one person to practice, but at different levels of their practice when they're capable of doing different things. Okay? So, so this one greatness of the teaching is to see that there's nothing incompatible or contradictory in all of the Buddha's teachings. Okay? So similarly, when the Buddha, when we have the 3 levels of being, the first one is work for future rebirth, good future rebirth. Second one is forget about future rebirths and get out of samsara. So you might say, wait a minute, Buddha told me to work for a good future rebirth, and now he's telling me forget future rebirths and gotta get out of samsara. He's contradicting himself. Well, no, he's not. It's just at the beginning, the most important thing is to work to have a good rebirth, because that's the most imminent thing, we're gonna die, and we need to make sure we have a good rebirth, because without a good rebirth, we're not gonna be able to practice and attain any higher states. Yeah, but then in the context of somebody who's more advanced, then you don't work for just a good rebirth, you work to stop all rebirths. Okay? Then somebody who's more advanced say, no, what are you looking for? Your own nirvana, and that, don't pay attention to that. You should, attain full awakening. So then again, you can get confused. Wait a minute. First he told me to get a good rebirth. Then he told me forget good rebirth, get nirvana. Now he's telling me forget nirvana, and I can't think about just nirvana for myself. I have to become a Buddha. Why can't the Buddha make up his mind what I should aim for? So if we're small-minded, we don't see that these are actually teachings designed for one person, but at different stages of the path. Okay? It's kind of like parents teaching little kids, what you tell your kids at different ages depends upon the maturity of the kid, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, then the second greatness is it allows you to easily discern the conqueror's main ideas, or the Buddha's intent. Okay? That's the third, sorry. So the second one is the greatness of allowing you to recognize that all the scriptures as instructions for practice. Okay, so it says by relying on the precious instructions, once you have ascertained the meaning of all the discourses and become skilled in which practices require analytic meditation and which ones require stabilizing meditation. Yeah, when you've understood all that, then you cease to reject the teaching and you recognize all the discourses as instructions. Okay? So what this means is that it makes... No, I can't do that. Okay. Sorry. You have to treat each computer differently, you know. It's like you have to treat each person differently, so you have to treat each computer differently. Okay, so it makes every spiritual instruction, without exception, dawn on the mind as a personal guideline. That's the meaning of the second one. So it helps you, when you hear a teaching, it helps you understand where different teachings belong on the schema of the stages of the path to awakening. And it helps you to realize that they're all teachings for personal instruction. Okay? And this is quite important, okay? Because otherwise, you know, there's a danger that we think, well, these teachings are all just for intellectual amusement, and they're kind of interesting, but they're just so that you learn a lot of information, but they're not really for somebody to practice. Yeah? So that's a big boo-boo if you think like that. Yeah? We should understand that all these teachings are meant for somebody to practice, you know, and that somebody is us. Yeah, so they're all meant as personal guidelines. You know, of course, what we practice at different times in the path is going to be different because our mind is going to gradually be expanding, and, you know, so we're going to be gradually become more capable of understanding more. But it's important, you know, to, when you hear different teachings, to accept that they're all fit for us to practice. Maybe not at this moment, but at some time or another during our practice. Okay? And so that's really important, you know, like I said, because otherwise you think, oh, all this stuff, it's not for practice, it's just verbal blah blah, or it's for somebody else to practice, it's not for me to practice. And anyway, all these different lamas are coming to town, and they say all different kinds of things, and I can't make any of it hang together. Okay, so this is one thing that is really, really beautiful about the Lamrim, is it helps you to put all the teachings together and to understand them as a path of practice. Yeah, so that, and I think this is especially important, you know, now in our modern day, because so many people, you know, especially lay people, you know, when you're in a Dharma center, you may not have consistent teachings, you know, of a text over a period of time. You have guest teachers come. So one teacher teaches this, next teacher teaches that, third teacher teaches this. Then you're going, what am I supposed to practice? You know? Because they're all, the Dharma's very vast, you're hearing all these different teachings, you get really confused. Okay? So what's brilliant about the Lamrim structure is as you learn it, you see, you know, I went over this two weeks ago. So if you didn't, it's good if you listen to the teaching from 2 weeks ago. It's very helpful because there I explained the 3 levels capacity being and how each being has a certain motivation, the meditations you do to generate that motivation, the meditations you do after you've generated that motivation in order to actualize the purpose of that motivation. So it's very helpful to understand that. Because then, you know, when different teachers come and teach different things, you can say, oh, that goes here at the beginning of the path. Oh, that goes there at the end. That goes here, that goes there. And then you can put it together as a whole instead of getting quite confused. Okay, now we're at the third one, that you can easily discern the conqueror's intention. So although the great treatises are the supreme instructions, it is difficult for an untrained mind to identify the main principles in them, and discerning them requires time and great effort, whereas with this instruction you can easily determine the conqueror's main ideas. Okay, so this is really true. You know, if you sit down, you know, all of the 4 Tibetan traditions, they all have a curriculum of texts that you're supposed to study, and you study these for, 15, 20 years or whatever, and they go into detail on all sorts of different topics, and you can learn these and you go, what am I supposed to do with all of this? How in the world do I put this into practice? Okay, so, and what does the Buddha mean? And, or even, you're studying the different tenet systems. And the Vaibhasikas say this, and the Tantrikas, and the Chittamadhyans, and the Madhyamikas, and like, what do I believe, and how am I supposed to practice this, and what does it do? Very easy to get confused. Yeah, because the great treatises from India are really, they're very vast, they're very profound. The thing that is so brilliant about the Lamrim is that it extracted the main points from all these treatises and then arranged them in an order that makes it very easy to practice. Okay? So that's by the 3 levels of capacity, being the person who seeks for a good rebirth, person who seeks liberation, person who seeks full awakening. Okay? And then you systematize the teachings according to those 3 capacities of beings. Yeah, and then you understand where all the great treatises, the material from the great treatises, where it goes. And I can really see the benefit from this, because when I was studying in France with Khensur Jumba Tekchok, I love studying the Indian treatises. I thought it was really great, but many of the people I studied with, just, my friends, were saying, how are we supposed to practice this? Yeah? Like you study even something like low rig, the different kinds of awarenesses or the different mental factors. What am I supposed to do with this material? How do you practice that? Yeah? Or if you're studying about syllogisms, yeah, a lot of debating stuff, how does this fit into my practice? What do I do with this? Or you go off for some tantric initiation, and now you're visualizing this and that and the other thing, and like you don't even know who you are, and you're visualizing yourself as 5 different other deities, and you get really confused. And I was like, where does this go? Okay? But when you have this understanding, of the progressiveness of the Lamrim, it really helps in that way. Okay, because you're able to see what the Buddha's intention was when he taught different things. Okay, and then the 4th greatness of the teaching, it allows you to automatically avoid grave misdeeds. So for those of us who are happily satisfied with the amount of negative karma we already have and don't really want any more, this is very helpful. Yeah? Okay, so it says, hence, with this instruction, you give up forsaking the excellent discourses by imagining some of the conqueror's words to be obstacles to attaining Buddhahood and others to be methods for it. Seeing some of the Buddha's teachings as obstacles to attaining Buddhahood, if you think like that, you're in big trouble. Okay? So committing grave misdeeds thereby is automatically avoided. So this is, it sounds like, seeing teachings of the Buddha as obstacles, and, what this means is that, and you see actually this happening so much, is people criticizing different Buddhist traditions. Yeah, what this is referring to is you may practice one tradition, but because you don't know how all the different steps of the path fit together into a whole, then when you encounter another tradition that is emphasizing a different aspect of the path or expresses different aspects of the path in different ways than what you're used to, it's very easy to get really judgmental and say, these traditions are all BS. You know, my tradition's the right one. You know, rah, 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 my tradition. So this is precisely the reason why His Holiness wanted the book Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions written, is to help people understand the commonalities of the teachings and to also see that there are differences of interpretation, but we can still respect each other even when there's differences of interpretation, or even when there's different ways of laying things out. So just because something is different from what we're used to doesn't mean it's bad. Yeah? And this is really quite important because in Asia there's a lot of sectarianism, you know, because there wasn't a lot of transportation and communication networks. Each tradition, what they heard about other traditions was just, you know, hearsay. And then that's what they taught to their disciples. They had never even met people from the other traditions. They heard, you know, oh, all these people who practice this and such, they're all selfish. You know, or all the people who practice this and such, they're practicing magic. It's not even the Buddhist teaching. And, you know, and all the traditions would criticize. And when you think that, you know, the Buddha was an amazingly skillful teacher, he taught so many different things because he realized that sentient beings have different ways of thinking and that one size is not going to fit all, and that different people are going to be attracted to different ways of practicing. And you can't say, you know, everybody has to do exactly like this, because people are attracted to different things. So he taught like this wide variety of different teachings so that there could be, you know, different ways of practicing according to different cultures. Yeah? But if people don't understand that, then whenever they meet something that's different, then they're critical. Yeah? And and you find this kind of sectarianism throughout Asia, and then it came down, you know, into the Westerners too. One thing I think that where we Westerners are what we're doing to try and prevent this is that people meet from different traditions. Like this year, we're having the 21st annual gathering of Western Buddhist monastics. So you have people from different traditions coming together in the spirit of friendship. And then, you know, we see how much we have in common. And it really develops your respect for other traditions and respect for the Buddha as a skillful guide. But, you know, when you think about, you know, many of the teachers of the Westerners, you know, they've never met people from other traditions. You know, somebody like His Holiness is really remarkable. He goes out and he meets everybody, you know, Buddhist, non-Buddhist, doesn't matter, okay? But most people are not like that. You know, they have their own tradition, their own teachers, their own lineage, yeah? And so then it becomes quite easy to criticize others. And if we do that, we're basically criticizing the Buddha's teachings. Yeah, now I don't know about you, but I don't want the karma of criticizing the Buddha's teachings, because that's pretty heavy karma. Yeah? So the nice thing about learning this Lamrim is that it gives you this broad, view of the different elements that constitute the path. And then you meet another tradition that practices these elements, but does it in a different way, and your mind is big enough to, encompass that. Okay? So you find, at the Abbey, well, first of all, our practice tradition is Tibetan, but our monastic tradition is from Taiwan. We're following the Chinese monastic tradition. Some people will go, what? What? You're not following the Tibetan monastic tradition? But you're Tibetan Buddhist. Well, it all came from the Buddha. Yeah? The Buddha did not teach one monastic tradition and not the other. The Buddha laid out the Vinaya. All the different Vinaya traditions came later. They all came from the Buddha. Does it really matter which one you follow? No, the important one is that you follow one of them. Yeah, and in our case, we chose the Dharmaguptaka, the one that's followed in China, because when I went to take full ordination in Taiwan, that was the lineage that was given. That's the only lineage that has the full ordination for women. And we wanted to have the women at the Abbey be fully ordained, so we chose that Vinaya tradition to follow. Okay? So there's a rhyme and a reason, and it worked out well. And I don't know if others are doing this as monasteries. Individuals do it. Yeah, but we're doing it as a monastery. Okay, so same thing. We do some Chinese practice. When we do the Chinese chanting. But if you look, when we chant the 3 refuges at the end, they're also dedication prayers, aren't they? Yeah, it's taking refuge and dedicating your merit, all in 3 verses. Yeah. So the meaning is the same as in the Tibetan tradition. We chant a prayer translated from Chinese. What does it matter? The meaning is all there already in what we're practicing. Okay. Yeah.
Would you have advice to how to react when you came across someone that, for us lay people in this society, and you come across a Buddhist person that is
critical? Yeah. Okay, so when you meet a Buddhist lay person who's criticizing the Buddhist practice.
Lay or not lay, but for us lay people, when you come across someone who's criticizing the other Buddhist tradition.
This person who's criticizing is Buddhist or is non-Buddhist? Is Buddhist. Then you keep your distance. Yeah? That's what I would say. Yeah? Because, if somebody's... what you have to understand is there's a difference between debating principles and criticizing. Okay? So debate is all throughout the Buddhist tradition. So let's take out a point. We debate it because we're trying to find the truth in this. Okay? So debating the content, that's fine. But saying this teaching didn't come from the Buddha is very different. Okay? Saying, oh, this teaching didn't come from the Buddha, this is all made up stuff. Yeah, that's very different than debating to analyze the different tenet systems, statements on the nature of reality. Okay? It's a kind of difficult thing because there are people that are quite controversial who call themselves Buddhist. Yeah? So what do? Do you respect them? Do you not respect them? Do you go to their teachings? Do you not go to their teachings? I think they always say that it's up to the students to really analyze and check out the qualities of a teacher, you know. And if a teacher is teaching something that does not belong to the general Buddhist, what is accepted as general Buddhist doctrine, you know, then you have your red flags, you know, because maybe they're making something up. Or if somebody's quite sectarian and criticizing everybody else. Yeah. But then, on the other hand, if you're trying to warn somebody about a controversial teacher, how do you do that without sounding like you're criticizing or being sectarian? Or do you not say something to somebody who's going to a controversial teacher, but then, you know, not saying something doesn't seem very kind either, because sometimes people need warnings about things. So, you know, I asked one of my teachers for guidance on this, because it comes up in the West quite a bit. And he said, if somebody sees somebody else as their teacher, they're in a student-teacher relationship, don't try to break that up, okay? But be open and receptive, because if, in case that person later realizes that the teacher is not behaving properly or whatever, then they may come to you for aid, so keep the door open so you can give them help. You know, what I've decided in terms of the controversy is, I got an email like this just a few days ago. My goodness. Yeah, I'll tell you about it. From somebody who had started on the internet. They were watching teachings by different teachers. And, you know, there's this controversy in the Tibetan tradition regarding this one, what some people call a protector, what His Holiness says is a spirit. Well, this person was watching the videos from the people who were saying that this practice is a Buddhist practice, this person, you know, it isn't a spirit, it's a Buddha, and they wound up going to some of the demonstrations against His Holiness. I don't know if any of you have ever seen these, where people are out on the streets saying, you know, false Dalai Lama, stop lying, and all kinds of things like this. And this person, you know, he had never been to any centers or anything, but he believed what these other people were saying, that His Holiness was limiting religious freedom, and so he went to these demonstrations, and he wrote and he said, I was saying all these things, being really angry at the Dalai Lama, who I've never even met, and saying all this stuff, and then I came home and I just felt really bad about what I did, so what do I do? You know, it really kind of broke my heart to read this, because, you know, he was really in a lot of pain, you know, spiritually, and for good reason, you know, he was led astray. But he let himself be led astray too. So I said, you need to do some purification. And in the future, you need to really check out the teachers and check out the teachings and make sure what people are saying is accurate information. You know. So I said, he told me the names of the people he had been watching, and I said, these two people are controversial. I didn't criticize them, I just said they're controversial. And you need to know that, so you need to know that you need to investigate and check up and make wise decisions. You know, and that's for you to think about. And then I said, His Holiness, you know, expressed his reasons about this, and here's the place where you can read that, and, you know, and think about it. Yeah. So I didn't say, oh, those two teachers, they're quite idiots, blah, 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 blah. You know, I didn't say that. You know, they weren't his teachers, but still, I felt like, you know, it's best I just say they're controversial, which is true. Yeah. And then he can examine and make up his own mind. That makes some sense? Huh? Mm-hmm.
The Riemann tradition, is that fitting in with what you told before about no differences in the...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because Longchenpa and Patrul Rinpoche are both from the Nyingma tradition. And they both wrote the... Rime. Oh, Rime. Okay. Rime, it's interesting. Rime actually means without a tradition. But actually it's a tradition. Yeah, they combined kind of Nyingma and Kagyu and maybe a little bit of Sakya. But it was actually a push against the power of the Gelupas in central Tibet, I think, because the Rime came from eastern Tibet more. Yeah, but the teaching's still the same if you look. The main differences in all these things come in terms of tantric traditions. Yeah, but in terms of the basic teachings that we all need to become familiar with, yeah, Rime, all of these the same. Or come to the same point, we should say. Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
Just a simple one. I'm just wondering about the dates for the author, Gomchen Ngawang, because it talks about...
Oh, the dates. I don't have the dates. You want to look them up on the internet and see if you can find the dates? It's in the 15th century somewhere, because his teacher lived in the 15th century.
I'm just wondering how close in time he lived to Tsongkhapa.
Oh, that's true. Well, his teacher was early. Yeah. Wait a minute. Where was his teacher here? Yeah, hold on. Yeah, 1404. So that was his teacher. His teacher may have started teaching in the 14... well, if his teacher was the sixth person from the sixth holder of the Ganden Tripa, of the Ganden throne, then he was after Je Rinpoche for, a number of years.
Isn't that throne only held for a few years before it passed on?
Yeah. I don't know how they actually do it.
Like 4 years or 7 years, so if you knew, you could count it.
Yeah, I don't know. Look it up and tell us, okay? Yeah?
In like a waking dream.
Huh?
In like a waking dream, he talks
Oh.
about it. Like waking,
Yeah. Oh, he mentioned it? Oh, okay. So what did he say?
he says how many years it is.
Okay, none of us remember. Okay, so look it up and then tell us.